"How do you know so much about this stuff?" Mark asked, and his follow-up revealed analytical thinking that separated him from his privileged classmates. "What kind of military training teaches you to think like the people you're supposed to be stopping?" His question carried respectful tone of someone who recognized expertise when he encountered it. The fact that he asked the right question, focusing on methodology rather than just demanding credentials, told Ava that he possessed intelligence that could be either dangerous ally or formidable opponent. Ava's answer sent a chill through the room that had nothing to do with air conditioning and everything to do with sudden realization that they might be sitting across from someone far more dangerous than they had assumed. "Every system has a weak point," she said, her smile cold as winter steel. "I used to specialize in finding ways into places where I wasn't invited, and the people who built those places really didn't want me there." The words carried implications that transformed their academic exercise into something that felt distinctly threatening, as if they had inadvertently invited a predator into their safe space. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and they glimpsed something dangerous underneath the quiet student persona, something that suggested her presence at Northgate Academy might involve purposes far more complex than earning a degree. Preston tried to regain control by redirecting the conversation toward conventional analysis, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Ava was hunting their target building rather than studying it, approaching their assignment with systematic precision of someone who had spent years finding and exploiting weaknesses in hostile territory. After the meeting ended, Ava made a discovery that transformed her understanding of the entire situation and revealed that Preston's hostility represented something far more dangerous than academic competition. While accessing the student portal, she treated the computer lab like potentially hostile ground, checking reflections in the monitor screen, identifying the quickest exit route, and scanning ventilation grates for surveillance equipment. The habits came back automatically, muscle memory, from safe house protocols that had kept her alive in places where paranoia was the difference between completing a mission and becoming a casualty statistic. She noticed system logs showing that Preston had gained administrative access to databases using credentials no student should possess. He hadn't just requested her for his group, he had hacked the school's network and altered assignment rosters himself, demonstrating criminal capabilities that suggested this was far from his first unauthorized intrusion. But the violation went deeper than academic manipulation. Hidden in the logs, she found evidence of comprehensive tracking software installed on her personal laptop, creating a digital wiretap that captured every email, every website visit, every private document she created. Standing alone in the computer lab after hours, Ava stared at the evidence, while her hand unconsciously moved to touch the screen, her fingertips tracing the data logs like she was reading Braille in a language of violation and betrayal. The gesture reminded her of nights in Afghanistan when she had monitored enemy communications, feeling simultaneously hunter and hunted, as she tried to stay one step ahead of people who wanted to kill her and everyone she protected. This felt disturbingly similar, the sensation of being watched by invisible eyes, tracked by hostile intelligence that treated her privacy as a target to be penetrated rather than a boundary to be respected. As she documented Preston's illegal activities, an encrypted message appeared on her screen from an unknown sender. "The Watchers are being watched, but you're not the only ghost in this machine." The Strategic Simulation Laboratory represented cutting-edge academic technology, with holographic displays and real-time modeling systems that could recreate any corporate environment with stunning accuracy. Professor Wilson had designed the exercise to test students' ability to think like both attackers and defenders, using a fictional but realistic headquarters as their target in a controlled environment. The lab's advanced systems created an immersive experience that transformed abstract concepts into something approaching actual operational planning, making theoretical discussions feel tangible and immediate. Preston had spent weeks preparing for this moment, crafting a presentation that combined stunning visuals with detailed analysis designed to demonstrate his intellectual superiority and natural leadership abilities to everyone present. His performance was flawless by conventional standards, delivered with confidence that came from expensive education and absolute certainty in his destined greatness. As he clicked through his sophisticated slides, Preston found himself scanning the room and catching sight of Ava sitting in complete stillness, too calm, too composed for someone supposedly outmatched by his superior preparation. The unnatural quiet in her posture unsettled him in ways he couldn't articulate, like looking at a loaded weapon that wasn't pointed at him but could be at any moment. Using advanced projection systems, he walked the class through a multi-phase infiltration plan that addressed every security measure identified during research. Phase 3 involves synchronized digital and physical intrusion, Preston explained, highlighting specific building areas with laser precision. While our cyber team creates network distractions, our physical team exploits maintenance access points identified through careful reconnaissance. It was textbook corporate espionage theory, delivered with polish that money could buy and complexity that impressed everyone watching. When his presentation ended, applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Professor Wilson looked genuinely impressed by the sophistication of Preston's analysis, while faculty members nodded approvingly at the professional quality of his delivery. Madison and Tyler beamed with reflected glory, basking in association with someone who had obviously established himself as their generation's intellectual leader. Other students whispered admiration for the plan's complexity and the resources Preston had invested in creating something that transcended typical academic work. Then Professor Wilson called Ava's name, and the energy in the room shifted like the moment before lightning strikes. She didn't move toward the podium or activate any of the presentation equipment that Preston had used so effectively. Instead, she stood slowly and walked into the audience area, positioning herself directly in front of Preston near the control panel with deliberate, predatory movement. Her approach carried the quality of ritual, as if following a script only she could see but that everyone recognized as leading towards something momentous and irreversible. "Preston's plan is very impressive," she began, her voice carrying clearly without amplification. "It's thorough, well-researched, and demonstrates exactly the kind of thinking that gets people killed in the real world." The compliment seemed genuine, making what followed more devastating as the audience realized they were watching systematic dismantling disguised as professional criticism. Because the biggest security vulnerability isn't technological, it's psychological. It's the arrogance of people who believe they're untouchable. And without warning, she reached past Preston and pulled the main power cable from the simulation system. Holographic displays vanished instantly, plunging the room into partial darkness as emergency lighting activated. Students gasped and Professor Wilson jumped up, but for a moment, absolute silence filled the space, like the aftermath of an explosion. No one spoke, no one moved, as if the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. Then Ava's voice cut through the darkness like a cold wind through a security breach, carrying the authority of someone who had executed such operations under life or death conditions. "The first thing any real infiltrator does isn't hack computers or study blueprints," she said, words carrying authority of someone who had executed such operations under life or death conditions. "It's eliminate the power supply. When electricity goes out, every electronic lock fails open, every camera goes blind, every motion sensor becomes useless." As she spoke, Ava wasn't just cutting power. She was bringing them face to face with the brutal reality she had lived through, stripping away their comfortable illusions, like pulling back curtains to reveal something that had been watching them all along. In those 90 seconds, the building belongs to the quietest mind in the room. The simplicity was staggering, reducing Preston's elaborate technological solution to irrelevance through basic tactical thinking that prioritized results over sophistication. Students who had been impressed by complex diagrams suddenly understood how vulnerable their theoretical fortress actually was when confronted by someone who thought in terms of destruction rather than construction. In the emergency lighting, Ava's face looked different, harder, more focused, like a soldier who had found herself back on familiar battlefield terrain where survival depended on seeing through enemy deceptions. As emergency power restored normal lighting, Preston stood frozen, his carefully prepared materials now useless, his authority evaporating like morning fog under harsh glare of practical reality. Professor Wilson struggled to process what had just happened, his voice emerging as more croak than command when he finally managed to speak. "Miss Callahan, this is highly irregular," he said, though his military background made it impossible to ignore the tactical brilliance of her demonstration. The room buzzed with shocked conversation as students tried to understand what they had witnessed. Some saw sabotage where others recognized genius, but everyone understood they had just watched something that went far beyond normal classroom competition. Preston's face cycled through emotions, confusion, anger, fear, as he realized his months of preparation had been rendered worthless by someone who understood that real operations prioritized speed and simplicity over technological complexity. But Ava's attention had moved beyond immediate reactions. Her eyes swept across the back wall, cataloging details everyone else had missed. Hidden among standard security equipment was a small black camera that didn't match the others. Military-grade surveillance gear that had no business in an academic setting. The sight of it triggered a flash of memory that hit her like ice water in her veins. She had seen that exact model before, mounted in a supposedly secure facility where her teammate Rodriguez had been captured and never seen again. The same technology, the same positioning, the same sense that invisible eyes were watching and evaluating everything she did for purposes that went far beyond academic assessment. As the room buzzed with shocked conversation, Ava stared at the military-grade camera and realized that someone from her past had found her. Someone who knew exactly who Rodriguez had been and what his disappearance meant to the one person who had made it home alive. The threat of academic probation hung over Ava like storm clouds gathering on the horizon, creating the kind of nightmare that any student facing expulsion from one of the country's most prestigious institutions would find devastating. Professor Wilson had scheduled a formal review of her disruptive behavior for the following week, and whispers in the hallways suggested that her scholarship was in serious jeopardy after her dramatic demonstration in the simulation laboratory. For most students, being expelled from Northgate would have meant the end of their dreams, and the beginning of a lifetime explaining why they had failed to meet the academy's standards. But Ava carried herself with the same calm confidence she had displayed from the beginning, as if academic consequences were merely inconveniences rather than catastrophic setbacks that would define the rest of her life. Sitting alone in the disciplinary office, she quietly studied her file and remembered another time when she had been benched under suspicion. A mission in Syria where intelligence had gone wrong and 3 people died because someone leaked their position. For weeks, she had been confined to base while investigators tried to determine who had compromised the operation. No charges were ever filed, just silence that stretched like a wound that wouldn't heal. Suspicion wasn't always loud, she reflected, touching the edge of her sister's coin in her pocket. Sometimes it came in the form of clipped emails and unopened doors, whispered conversations that stopped when you entered a room, and the gradual realization that the people you served had decided you might be the enemy. The old commanding officer had eventually cleared her, but the damage was done. Trust, once broken, never quite fit back together the same way. Mark Chen approached her 3 days after the simulation incident, his usual comfortable arrogance replaced by something that looked almost like respect mixed with genuine curiosity about her true capabilities. Unlike Preston and his circle of privileged followers, Mark had earned his place at Northgate through programming genius rather than family connections, which made him sensitive to the struggles of outsiders trying to prove themselves in an environment designed to exclude them. He moved like a soldier, unsure whether he was stepping across a minefield or a meadow, each step calculated and careful as he navigated the dangerous territory between loyalty and conscience. But Ava watched him approach with the clinical attention of an interrogator, cataloging every micro-shift in his posture, every hesitation in his tone, every twitch of facial expression that might reveal his true intention. His body language suggested genuine conflict, but she had learned that the best spies were often the ones who believed their own cover stories.